Every single day, you touch plastic about 100 times without thinking about it. From the toothbrush in your hand this morning, to the lid on your coffee, to the wrapper on your lunch, to the case on your phone. Right now, as you watch this, plastic sits within arm's reach of you, and I guarantee that is true. And every single piece of it will outlive you. That water bottle you tossed out last week will still be sitting on this planet 450 years from now. It will outlast your house, it will outlast the street you live on, and while it sits there, it quietly cracks into pieces so small you cannot see them. Those pieces drift into rivers, settle into soil, float through the air, and land in the food you eat. Scientists have now pulled tiny plastic fragments out of human blood, out of lungs, and out of the brains of people who never asked for them to be there. The world has known about this for decades, and in all that time, nobody has managed to build a replacement that actually works. Every attempt has slammed into the same wall. Every single one, until a small team at a forestry school in northern China did something the rest of the world called impossible. They turned bamboo into plastic. Not mixed with plastic, not coated in plastic, they rebuilt bamboo itself into a material that is stronger than the petroleum kind, runs through the same factory machines, and then disappears in plain dirt in less than 2 months. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how they pulled it off, why nobody else could do it, and whether the plastic in your hand right now belongs to the last generation of its kind. And there is one word I need you to keep in the back of your mind, because it sits at the center of this entire story. That word is bonds. Remember it, because it keeps coming back. If this kind of video brings you value, hit the like button. It genuinely helps, and subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Before any of this makes sense, you need to understand the thing China is trying to kill, because plastic is not just another material. Plastic is the most successful material humans have ever invented, and trying to replace it is like pulling the foundation out from under a building while people are still living inside. Look around whatever room you are sitting in right now and really look. Your chair probably carries plastic in it, the light above your head hides behind a plastic cover, and your TV remote, your headphones, the pen on your desk, and the outlet on your wall all depend on it. Plastic holds your world together in 100 places you never notice, and it earned that spot. You can melt plastic and pour it into any shape you want, from a tiny gear inside a watch, to a bumper on a truck, to a bag that keeps blood sterile during surgery. No other material on Earth handles all of those jobs at once. It does not rust like metal, rot like wood, or shatter like glass. You can freeze it, soak it, drop it off a roof, and leave it in the sun for a year, and it just sits there and takes it. And the cost sits close to nothing. A single plastic bag runs less than a penny to produce. 1 penny. Try building a bag out of metal for that price, and you will see why nobody has. So when someone says we should just get rid of plastic, the question nobody wants to answer is simple. Name one material that does all of that. For 30 years, the honest answer has been nothing. And that is exactly the problem. Because the thing that makes plastic so perfect is the same thing that is now poisoning the planet. Plastic does not break down, and that is the whole point of it. That is why we use it. But here's the thing. A fork you used for 10 minutes at a birthday party will exist on this earth for 300 years after everyone at that party is gone. It does not just sit there quietly either. It slowly cracks into smaller and smaller fragments, pieces so tiny they turn invisible. Those pieces float into oceans, drift through the air, and settle into soil. And now they are showing up inside the human body. Researchers tested the blood of ordinary people, and roughly 9 out of every 10 carried plastic particles floating in their bloodstream. A separate study landed on a number that is hard to hear. People who had plastic fragments lodged in the walls of their arteries faced a risk of heart attack or stroke that was 4.5 times higher than people without them. Think about that for a second. The stuff we wrap our food in is turning up inside human hearts. The world pumps out over 400 million tons of this material every year, and less than 1/10 of it ever gets recycled. The rest piles up in the ground, in the water, and now inside of us. And that brings us to the question that makes the China story so shocking. Because the world has been trying to build a better version for decades, and it has failed over and over for the exact same reason every time. Understanding that reason is how you understand why what happened in Harbin changes everything. For 30 years, scientists and companies have chased the dream of a plant-based plastic that could knock out the oil-based kind. And every single time, they have slammed into the same wall. Here's how that wall works. To replace plastic, you need three things at once. The material has to be strong enough to actually use, it has to break down in nature so it does not pile up forever, and it has to cost little enough that companies will actually buy it. Getting one of those is easy. Getting two is hard. Getting all three has been until now impossible. The most famous attempt is a material called PLA, which you have probably seen printed on coffee cups that say compostable on the side. Factories make PLA from cornstarch, and it sounds great on paper. Made from a plant, breaks down, problem solved. None of that turned out to be true. PLA only breaks down inside a special building that holds the temperature above 58 degrees Celsius for weeks at a time. If you throw that compostable cup in your garden, it will sit there for years, looking and acting exactly like the regular plastic it was supposed to replace. PLA also cracks easily, it cannot handle heat, and it comes from corn, which means farmers have to grow corn for packaging instead of food. In a world where hundreds of millions of people do not have enough to eat, using farmland to grow plastic is a serious problem. Another option is called PHA, which actually does break down in nature, and that is the good news. The bad news is that the production cost lands at about 5 times more than regular plastic. When your replacement runs 5 times the price, nobody switches. And PHA has been stuck in small labs making tiny batches for years without ever breaking through. Starch-based plastics fall apart when they get wet, which makes a water bottle that dissolves in rain about as useful as it sounds. Cellulose plastics need harsh chemicals to produce, which cancels out the point of going green in the first place. Same wall every time. You can be strong or you can break down. You can be cheap or you can be green. But nobody could build one material that did all of it at once. And the reason runs deeper than bad luck. Plants get their strength from something called cellulose, which is the stuff that lets a tree trunk hold up thousands of pounds and lets a blade of grass stand back up after you step on it. But cellulose carries a problem. It is locked in place by tiny connections, and here is that word again: bonds. Hydrogen bonds. These bonds grip the cellulose in a rigid shape, and you cannot melt it and pour it into a mold the way you do with oil-based plastic. If you try to force it, the whole thing snaps. For 30 years, scientists knew the right ingredients were sitting inside every plant on Earth, but they could not figure out how to rearrange them without destroying everything. Imagine you have a box full of perfect Lego bricks, and you know you could build anything with them, but every brick is glued to the ones around it. Every time you try to pull them apart, they break. You cannot build anything new because you cannot free the pieces without wrecking them. That is the wall. That is what stopped every team, every company, and every lab for 3 decades. And that is the wall a group of researchers at a school that studies trees just figured out how to break through. When you hear how they did it, you will understand why engineers around the world could not believe the results. The breakthrough came from a place that nobody in the plastics industry was watching. Not a billion-dollar chemical company, not a famous tech lab. It came from Northeast Forestry University in Harbin, China, a school known for studying trees, wood, and forest science, the kind of place that plastic engineers would never think to look at. The lead researcher was Haipeng Yu, working alongside Dawei Zhao, and they partnered with a team at Shenyang University of Chemical Technology. In October 2025, they published a paper in Nature Communications, one of the most respected science journals in the world, describing something the field thought could not be done. They took bamboo and turned it into plastic. Not by mixing bamboo fibers into regular plastic, which is what everyone else had tried, but by rebuilding the bamboo itself at the smallest possible level into a brand new material. Here's how they pulled it off, and I promise it is simpler than it sounds. Remember those bonds we talked about? The tiny connections that lock cellulose into a rigid shape? The ones that every other team tried and failed to break without destroying everything. Yu and Zhao found a way to unlock them without causing any damage. They soaked the bamboo cellulose in a special liquid made from zinc chloride and formic acid. And that liquid did something remarkable. It gently pulled apart the hydrogen bonds, holding everything stiff while leaving the cellulose molecules themselves perfectly intact. Picture a tightly knotted fishing net. Each piece of string in that net is strong, but the knots are trapping it in a shape you do not want. What this liquid did was untie every single knot, carefully, one by one, without cutting a single string. So now you have free cellulose molecules floating in a liquid, with every building block whole, every piece undamaged, just not stuck together anymore. That alone would be impressive, but what happened next is what turned this into a real breakthrough. They added ethanol, the same type of alcohol that goes into hand sanitizer, and the ethanol did something no one fully expected. It guided the loose molecules to reconnect in a completely new pattern, one that was tighter, denser, and stronger than anything that existed in the original bamboo. Think of it this way. You untied a knotted net, and then you retied it by hand with better knots and a tighter weave. Same strings, same material, but the finished net came out dramatically stronger than the one nature made. There is that word again, bonds. The old bonds held bamboo together as a plant. The new bonds hold it together as a plastic. Same molecules, same raw material, completely different result. The team called it BM Plastic, short for bamboo molecular plastic. And that name is important because it tells you exactly what separates this from everything that came before. This is not bamboo mixed into something else. This is bamboo rebuilt at the molecular level into something entirely new. Claims are easy though, and numbers are hard. And the numbers on this material are what turned a research paper into a global news story. BM plastic can handle a pulling force of 110 megapascals. And that number means nothing to most people, so let me put it in terms that do. That score landed at roughly twice the strength of PLA, the corn-based bioplastic that is supposed to be the best green option on the market. It also beat the hard plastic used in car dashboards and Lego bricks. And if you have ever stepped on a Lego in bare feet in the middle of the night, you know exactly how strong that plastic is. BM plastic is stronger. Bending resistance came in at 6.41 gigapascals. And what that means in plain language is that it does not warp or sag when you load weight onto it. That score topped ABS plastic, which is what factories use to build power tool cases and motorcycle helmets, things that need to absorb a hit and hold their shape. BM plastic handled it better. Heat testing pushed the material above 180 degrees Celsius. The researchers left samples in extreme heat for 7 straight days with no cracks and no warping. And then they soaked separate samples in strong acid with no surface damage. If you ran the same test on a PLA cup, you would end up with a melted puddle on the table by the afternoon. And then came the number that grabbed the most attention from anyone who cares about what plastic is doing to the planet. BM plastic broke down completely in regular soil in about 50 days. Not in a special facility, not in a high-tech composter, just in plain dirt, like a fallen leaf returning to the earth. After roughly 50 days, the material was gone, with no fragments left behind, no invisible pieces floating into the water supply, and no microplastics working their way into someone's bloodstream. That is not a typo. 50 days. And one more number might be the most surprising of all. When the team recycled BM plastic using the same zinc chloride and formic acid process, the recycled version held on to about 90% of its original strength. You need to understand why that changes things. Regular plastic gets weaker every time you recycle it, which is why recycled plastic usually ends up as park benches and trash cans instead of new products. The material degrades a little more with each cycle. BM plastic does not carry that problem. You could run it through the recycling process 5 or 10 times, and it would still come out nearly as strong as the day it was first made, which changes the math on recycling completely. So you have a material that outperforms conventional plastic in strength, survives extreme heat and acid, runs through standard factory machines, disappears in regular soil in 7 weeks, and barely loses strength when recycled, all made from a plant with no oil required. The team published everything, every test, every number, every step of the process, open for the whole world to check. Professor Andrew Dove from the University of Birmingham in England independently reviewed the research and pointed to bamboo's rapid growth as one of the most promising pathways for renewable high-performance materials. And so far, the numbers are holding up. But here's the thing. Even perfect lab results do not matter if you cannot get enough of the raw material. And this is where the story takes a turn that almost feels unfair, because the plant they chose is not just any plant. It is one of the most abundant and fastest-growing living things on Earth, and the country that figured out how to use it happens to control more of it than anyone else. Bamboo is not a tree. It is a grass, and it grows like nothing else on this planet. Some species shoot up more than a meter in a single day, and that is not a figure of speech. You could mark a bamboo shoot in the morning, go to work, come home, and measure a real, visible difference with a tape measure. No other plant on Earth matches that speed. When you cut bamboo down, it does not die. It grows right back from the same roots with no replanting, no clearing new land, and no watering systems. And you can harvest from the same spot every 3 to 5 years for decades. A pine tree needs 25 to 30 years before it reaches cutting size, and corn has to be planted from scratch every single year. Bamboo just keeps coming back on its own. Each acre of bamboo produces roughly 5 times more material than a regular timber forest, while pulling carbon dioxide out of the air faster than most trees. And here is the part that fixes one of the biggest problems with corn-based plastics. Bamboo grows on rocky hillsides and degraded land that you could never use for farming food, which means your dinner and your packaging can come from completely different ground. And this is where China's position becomes enormous. China holds over 7.5 million hectares of bamboo forest spread across about 20 provinces, with more than 500 different species growing in that territory. The bamboo industry already pulls in close to 320 billion yuan every year and supports more than 7.5 million farmers who depend on it for a living. What that means is that the roads are already built, the trucks are already running, the processing plants already exist, and the workers already know what they are doing. The entire system for growing, cutting, moving, and handling bamboo at an enormous scale has been operating for decades. Most breakthrough materials die not because the science fails, but because nobody can produce enough of the raw material fast enough at a price that makes sense. Bamboo does not face that problem, because the supply chain is not something China needs to build. It is something China already runs. And bamboo is not limited to one country. It grows across huge stretches of Asia, Africa, and South America, and the world holds about 22 million hectares of bamboo forest in total. If this material works at scale, the raw ingredient is already sitting there, growing a meter a day in dozens of countries. But none of that matters if factories cannot use it, and this is where BM plastic pulled away from every bioplastic that came before it. Most bioplastics need special equipment, custom machines, unique molds, and conditions that standard plastic factories cannot handle. That forces a company to spend millions on new gear before producing a single product, which kills adoption before it starts. BM plastic runs through injection molding machines, and injection molding is how most plastic products in the world are made right now. You feed the material in, push it into a shaped mold, and it cools into the finished product. Billions of items roll off these machines every year, from bottle caps to phone cases to car parts. And if your factory already owns an injection molding machine, you could feed BM plastic into it and start producing. The researchers proved this was real by making working products, including lampshades, gears, panels, and packing containers, all on machines that already existed. They did not modify anything. They did not upgrade anything, they just swapped the material and products came out. The process also runs at room temperature, and that detail matters more than it sounds. Regular plastic factories burn through enormous amounts of energy heating material to extreme temperatures using giant ovens, pressurized tanks, and massive electrical systems. BM Plastics skips all of that, and the energy savings add up across every single batch. The chemicals involved in the process, zinc chloride and formic acid, are common and affordable, and the ethanol can be collected and reused, which means nothing in the method requires rare or expensive ingredients. Now the price, and this is where things stay honest. Producing BM plastic costs about $2,300 per ton right now, while regular petroleum plastic comes in at about $1,200 per ton, which puts bamboo plastic at nearly double the price. That sounds like a wall, but two things knock it down. First, every new material starts expensive. Solar panels used to cost 10 times what they cost today. Flat-screen TVs used to carry a $10,000 price tag, and as production grows and the process gets more efficient, the price always drops. BM plastic sits at the very beginning of that curve. Second, and this is the part most people miss, the $1,200 price tag on regular plastic is not the real cost. It does not cover cleaning plastic out of oceans. It does not cover the medical bills tied to microplastic health problems. And it does not cover the government fines that countries are starting to hand out to polluters. When you stack all of that together, some experts project the true cost of conventional plastic reaching $2,400 per ton by 2040. And at that number, bamboo plastic stops being the expensive option and starts being the cheaper one. China did not stumble into this position by accident. The government saw this coming years ago, and in 2022, they launched a national plan to start replacing plastic with bamboo products. A detailed 3-year action plan followed in 2023 with specific targets and real funding. And China's 14th 5-year plan set aside over 12 billion yuan for modernizing bamboo processing across the country. Real products are already showing up. Bamboo fiber tableware exports jumped 35% in 2025. Cities started installing bamboo pipes where steel and cement used to go. And engineers built a drone with bamboo making up a quarter of its body that weighed 20% less than carbon fiber and cost about a quarter as much. And while Chinese researchers were publishing their bamboo plastic paper, the rest of the world tried to solve the plastic crisis through politics and failed. In December 2024, delegates from over 170 countries gathered in South Korea to finalize a global plastics treaty. But oil-producing nations blocked any limits on plastic production, and the talks collapsed. Negotiators tried again in Geneva in August 2025, and the same arguments produced the same deadlock with the same failure. The message that sent was clear: do not wait for governments to agree, because the countries and companies that build the replacement first will own the market. And right now, China sits further ahead than anyone else. But I would not be honest with you if I skipped the problems that are still unsolved, because this is not a fairy tale, and real challenges stand between a lab paper and the future of an entire industry. BM plastic is rigid, which makes it great for hard products like cases, containers, gears, and panels. But it cannot yet do what thin, flexible plastic does. Cling wrap, stretchy bags, and bendy tubes need a different kind of material, and BM plastic has not cracked that challenge yet. There is also the question of timing. The material breaks down in 50 days in soil, which is incredible for disposal. But what about a phone case that needs to survive 3 years? Or a car part that needs to hold up for a decade? The researchers need to prove that the material stays strong during use and only breaks down after disposal under specific conditions. And that work is still in progress. And the biggest challenge of all is scale. A massive gap sits between making something work in a university lab and producing millions of tons of it for the global market. A gap that takes years of engineering, billions of dollars in investment, and a lot of trial and error. Nobody should pretend that part will be easy. But here is what none of those challenges change. For 30 years, scientists tried to build a plant-based plastic that was strong enough, cheap enough, and clean enough to take down the oil-based kind. Every attempt hit the same wall. Strong but does not break down, breaks down but too weak, performs well but costs 5 times too much. Nobody could crack all 3 at once. BM plastic cracked all 3, along with heat resistance, along with recycling, along with factory readiness, along with a supply chain that already operates at massive scale. No other bioplastic in history has done that. Not one. Now step back and look at the full picture. The world pumps out over 400 million tons of plastic every year. Only about 9% of it gets recycled. The rest piles up in oceans, in landfills, and inside human bodies. Governments spent 3 years trying to agree on a treaty and failed twice. Oil companies have no reason to stop, and the pile grows bigger every single year. That was the world before October 2025. After October 2025, a published peer-reviewed paper showed that a grass that grows a meter a day and does not need farmland and grows back after you cut it, and China already harvests 30 million tons of per year, can be rebuilt at the molecular level into a material that beats petroleum plastic in head-to-head tests and then vanishes into the soil in 7 weeks. Remember that word from the beginning, bonds. This whole story comes down to bonds. The hydrogen bonds that held bamboo together for millions of years. The bonds that no one could figure out how to unlock without breaking everything. And the new bonds, tighter and stronger than the originals, that a small team in a cold city in northern China figured out how to build. The old bonds kept cellulose trapped as a plant. The new bonds set it free as a plastic. Same molecules, same bamboo, completely different future. The world that ran on petroleum plastic did not announce its own ending, because these shifts never do. They start quietly in a lab, in a paper, in a factory making lampshades and gears from a material that did not exist 2 years ago. And then one morning, you pick up your coffee cup and notice it feels a little different. You check the label and it reads bamboo, and you toss it in the garden when you are done. 50 days later, it is part of the earth again. That morning has not arrived yet, but for the first time in 100 years of trying, you can actually see it from where we are standing. If this video changed how you think about something you touch 100 times a day, hit the like button and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Here is my question for you. If the answer to one of the biggest pollution crises in human history was sitting in a bamboo forest the whole time, just waiting for someone to ask the right question, what other solutions do you think nature is hiding in plain sight right now? Tell me in the comments.